Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to Centering Justice. My name is Hamida Bhagarathi. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am so overjoyed to be with you here today. So, as we enter into this space, going to carry on a long held tradition started by Ananya Mayuka, someone who had held this program before, and asking everyone at their own pace to take a deep breath in and slowly release it at your own pace to help us transition into this space, knowing that you may be coming from meetings, grocery shopping, working out, props to you, and a host of other things. But we're going to spend this hour and a half today exploring how the revolution doesn't have to hurt. So I'll name that I join you from Ypsilanti in Michigan, on the unceded and currently occupied lands of the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi, who create the three council fires of Michigan, and the Sauk and the Fox and the Wyandot, and land in which contemporary Indigenous peoples continue to live and thrive and contribute to their and even our collective uplift. So we talk about collective uplift and contemporarily of revolution. What does revolution look like? And I think when we think about both in the past and in the current and even in the future, we often can think collective uplift or revolution are really heavy, somber, serious, humorless things. But as we were thinking on our team, that doesn't have to be true. And that probably in real life is not true. So we're going to spend some time digging deep into interrogating how is there joy in the revolution? How is there humor and love and play in the revolution? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's what's bringing us here today. And so a little bit about Centering Justice. As a program, we are 2 years old. So is that not quite toddler yet? But we invite visionaries, storytellers, doers, and healers who are interrupting the status quo to really inspire us, reinvigorate us, help us believe and bear witness to the work they're already doing to both at one point dismantle the structures and systems that are harmful to BIPOC communities, as well as create something that's new. And just as a tiny note, after today, we'll be, there's Ananya, we gotta let her in. We'll be going on a brief hiatus for July. Please stay tuned, and we plan to see you virtually in August. And as a note, during our time to get together today, you will note that Yodit Meskin-Johnson, Carly Frederick, and myself will be softly facilitating our speakers, but our speakers are going to do their own thing. So they're going to spend the most of the time just leading this out. And we are so overjoyed to have Nicole Denson with us, Violeta Donawa, enoje, OzJam, Kulkiran Nakai with us today to talk through how the revolution doesn't have to hurt and where we can find pockets of joy. I will shift over to Yodi to offer us some reflection and grounding.
Listen, let me tell you, I woke up with, now I'm gonna date myself, but I want y'all to sing along with me if you remember this song. I don't wanna grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got the best for so much less. You really flip your lid from bikes to trains to video games. It's the biggest toy store there is. That just tells you, if that just gives you a little bit. I also, in a meeting with one of our leaders this morning who happens to be with us, I told her that she was not gonna be, remember Life cereal, give it to Mikey, he'll eat it. I said, we are not going to do that, not on today. So I have been inspired all week by our guest, y'all. And I think the summer transition always kind of takes me to a place of release. I know, because I always take a lot of July off, that a break is near. And it seems like the delight of imagining that starts to well up in my spirit. Is also, honey, the end of the budget season and the fiscal year. Oh, I'm knee deep in a spreadsheet. We just did a week worth of planning and holding the space for our team. I done shut down the whole organization in May, y'all. Tomorrow we gonna do some planning. We on Zoom, we under the tent, we doing it all. The baby done finished 7th grade. I mean, my goodness, if you could throw it at me in June, it is there. And listen, since we last met in May, these systems have literally killed our babies and our elders and simultaneously, figuratively tried to rob and snatch the child out of us. The movement, we're weary. We've been 2.5 years in a pandemic. They didn't open things back up like we ain't all traumatized, right? So I don't know about you, but I feel worse than I did on some days in 2022 than I did in 2020. And I think some of our licensed social workers and therapists here could explain to me why that is, but I feel that deep in my body. Honey, this movement tries to threaten our joy. This patriarchy, baby, he be out here trying to steal our rights, define our identities, fit us neatly in boxes, legislate our bodies, and rob us of our birthright to pleasure. And sadness, y'all, sadness will try to snatch laughter right out of your throat. And yet, we rebuke that today. We rebuke that. We are reclaiming our joy. We are sitting in the gift and rights of pleasure and intimacy and love and humor. Oh my God, y'all, we got some clowns on this here Zoom today. I'll just say we might have had conversations about farts and queefs when we were getting ready for this session. I'ma just say it, and I ain't never talked about a fart or a queef in a meeting, but I did this week, and damn it, I am here for it. That was probably the most revolutionary thing I did. You just wait, you just wait. So thank you for being with us. We hope that you will laugh like a toddler, like a 2-year-old, that you will feel the embodiment of the gift of these people who have joined us and their insights and their wisdoms. We hope you'll sit back in your chair a little bit, lean back from the computer a little bit, let your back relax and your hips settle in, and let's get into it. And I have to thank, finally, my sister in love, Keisha Gray, because I posted, this will tell you something about me. I love funny folk. I don't have a lot of funny people around me. I got way too many serious people around me. So I had to go to the Facebooks. That's you organizers. That's y'all, serious, always in our heads. I had to go to the Facebooks to find some funny people. And Keisha Gray, who's with us, was a guest last month, helping us think about our wise counsels. The sister came through with none other than her sister. And you'll get a chance to meet enoje in a moment. So thank you, Keisha. And I gotta bow down to my girl, Ananya, who I heard is here. We spoke your name. We love you. We miss you dearly. And so glad you could make time from your doctoral studies to be with us. All right, y'all, let's get going, Carly.
Thanks, Nadine. We always wanna invite our speakers to bring their whole selves into this space. And so with that, I'll just begin by asking each of them to share their name, their pronouns, and the communities and identities that they're drawing upon as they enter this conversation. So Nicole, would you be willing to get us started?
Of course, Carly. And thank you so much, Carly, Yodid, Hamida. Thank you so much for allowing me in this space. I am honored and I am privileged to be here. I had that reminder. I am in Lansing right now, and I graduated from Michigan State. Anybody who went to Michigan, oh well, go green, go white. The shade starts. And so with that being said, I just left the Capitol and there was a Mama's March. And the Mamas Marches through Mother and Justice, Black women marching about the attack on Roe versus Wade and all the inequities. And it was so beautiful because I saw so many organizers and friends and people I knew in spaces. But then I had the privilege to leave that space and come over to an organization called One Love Global that does racial healing transformation work. And then to get into this conversation, in this presentation, the layered amount of love that I feel, I haven't felt in a very long time. And so just thank you all for being here. And since we're talking about Lansing, I want to start the conversation off by saying, in 2016, the world and everything changed, it felt like, for many people after the president was elected in 2016. For someone like me, with my communities of being a Black woman, a Black queer woman, a mother, I'm like, y'all just waking up, like, hello, what's up? Like, what are y'all doing? But it was a really great chance for me to take my organizing, my advocacy that I did in Detroit, where I'm from. It was a great time for me to change the narrative and try to not do the whole white suffrage movement thing, right? So I remember working with a campaign, Women's March at the time. And I remember it being 2018, been working, we did the convention down here in Detroit. And I remember 2018, they said, well, we're gonna do a march here in Lansing at the Capitol. I said, okay, cool. Now, backstory, a little bit about bringing my whole self here, is I remember dropping out of a public speaking class in college. I was so afraid. I couldn't deal with it. I'm the only child. And I'm in the middle of being an introvert and extrovert. Yep, I see you, Yodi. Yeah, we got a little bit of weirdness, we can party with ourselves. And so I sit in that space of being so quiet and shy, but because I love the community so much, it gives me this fire, right? It's like all of my ancestors, everybody is just holding on to me and lifting me up, literally. And I remember being there, and it was probably about 10,000 people. And it was a lot of those, excuse my language, those pink P word hats. It was a lot of those. That was a little obnoxious, but I remember seeing a flood of people. And we were going over the flow, the run of show. And they said, well, you go first, Nicole. I said, what you say now? I was terrified. And I learned the importance of grounding because I come from an advocacy social work background of dealing with survivors of trauma, sexual violence, intimate partner violence. And sometimes I realized from being this on the other side of doing that work, I was doing a lot of talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. But that moment, I stood in my power. That moment, I realized that I had the opportunity and the privilege to not be stuck at some quote unquote dead end job, not being able to get transportation, not having anyone to take care of my children. I realized that if I have to be here, I want to show up. And I remember that day, I realized that this is for me. And I sit in those spaces. My pronouns are she, her, they, them, or queen. I decided to call my name Queen, K-Q-U-E-E-N. When I was little, my mother wanted to force me in little dresses. I said, absolutely not. I want to play basketball sometimes. But I understand that all of that is me, all of my entirety. And since I was little, I've been looking for spaces. I couldn't find it. So I decided to create it in 2019. I was tired of working for some white supremacist nonprofit industrial complex jobs and organizations. And I realized that my real liberation is wrapped up in making sure that I feel seen and heard no matter what, that the work will be done and can be done. But it doesn't have to hurt. And being on the other side of running my consulting firm, I love to do layered approaches, free flowing. One day I might want us, me and my consultants, to do work up at the Capitol, speaking to the House of Representatives. But I also want to be in a protest in the street somewhere, in Detroit. Or I might want to do art and healing in the park, or poetry. But guess what? We can do that. We don't have to live in a box. And with rules, Robert's rules, and these different tactics and how we run meetings, I just feel like there's so much more. And the one thing, as I wrap up, COVID taught me, that period, is we can create, we can innovate. I love sitting in my space with only pajamas on from the bottom down and being able to shut the computer off, turn on whatever music I want, have a twerk session, shake my butt, do whatever I want, and then turn it back on. Because guess what? I can. That is how we have survived, thrived, and navigated these terrible, terrible systems. But we have to think about the resistance is not just in a second. We have to continue to work towards liberation and resistance and have a balance with it. So just thank you so much for having me in this space. I really appreciate it.
Such amazing energy, Nicole. Thanks for getting us started. Kulkiran, are you ready?
Absolutely. Sat Sri Akal, everybody. My name is Kulkiran, and that means the rays of light that shine on the family. No pressure. But I so appreciate, Nicole, you starting us off, and also hearing that you too, closed the laptop and also put some music on and twerk. That's exactly what I did to prepare for today. This morning was I had my little mini twerk session for myself, and the groundedness, the feeling of just being embodied, feeling liberated, feeling like I have that permission. I'm bringing that energy into this space. And I'm a first generation American born to immigrant parents from the Desi diaspora, so the Punjabi Sikh empire. So I'm South Asian, East Indian, and that brings in a lot of implications with the model minority myth. I also was a latchkey kid growing up, and I'm the oldest of three, and huge age differences between me and my siblings. And I'm out here in Michigan on Anishinaabe land while my family is in California, and I was able to find my footing out here and my people. Actually, once I came out to myself being queer and femme, and also embracing my fatness, like fat liberation over body positivity. And that's, yes, exactly. Thank you, Yodit. Like, I also dressed for today to really just to say yes to all of me in the fullness of me and having that permission. This is so different than any other panel or speaker thing that I've ever done, presentation that I've done before. So that really feels exciting and liberating as well. And I can sense just a little bit of nerves just because, this is so important to me. This is a really important topic, but it's an important practice. And to bring in what I can do or how I can share that, and then also to be in community, to learn, to grow, and to bond, as like what we named at the top before everybody was welcomed in. And so I also bring in the perspective of being somebody who is neurodivergent, or I like to say neuroemergent, and carrying with me invisible illnesses and chronic pain. And I have a degree, several degrees, but there's such a stuffiness in this, the name of being a clinical psychologist. And I'm playing with that language, like, what does that mean? And why does that hurt to name myself that way? And peeling back some of those layers to decolonize my work, my practice in the therapeutic sense, but also just out and about in the world. Because as a therapist, it's like people can tell that I'm an empath or a healer or whatever, and I get a lot of stories, I get a lot of pain, but also because of my name, the rays of light that shine on the family, I think people see in me the light and are drawn to that, and I'm drawn to the light inside of others too. And so there's like a divinity, a connection, a resonance inside of that. And so I'm just feeling in this moment, feeling very grounded, feeling very humbled, very grateful. I am in awe of our humanity, of our collective spirit, of our divinity, and moving through life as a multi-marginalized individual, bringing in play and pleasure and love as like guiding principles to how to navigate trauma and depression and the shadows of our humanity and our history as well. And I also bring in perspective, not just as a therapist, but I also am a performer, I'm an improviser and a drag artist. And so I bring in play and creativity, gender bending. One of my favorite passions is smashing the patriarchy. And that's what this shirt is. I'm very excited about my shirt because it's very relevant and etc. But also, what that means, like to be in the role of a comic or somebody who uses humor and who uses play with multi-marginalized identities and the responsibility of not punching down, not laughing at. And there's such an ethic and integrity to that type of work just going on the stage, whether it's spontaneous through improv or more planned through drag. And I also bring in perspective as a community organizer and activist, having served on the IPSY Pride steering committee for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's been really lovely to be in all of these different places and platforms and to see how my own humanity is evolving, but to also see or how to kind of be in relationship, to be in right relationship with myself, with my chosen family, or just, with the people around me, with the land, with life itself. And I think too, just to lastly say, like, even though I can share all of these things about myself, I'm not a representation of, all that they see people out there, or I'm speaking on my own experiences, and I'm trying to, even in this, I'm experimenting with like not being attached to an outcome or an expectation of how this is supposed to go or feel. I really want to liberate myself from that oppression and give myself permission to show up as I am, that I'm enough, and to say that out loud as an invitation for you to join me in that rebellion. And I so appreciate New and Hamida and Carly and Yodit. And I so appreciate having met Nicole and Enoje, and to be in space again with Violeta. Yes, exactly. And so I can feel the warmth, I can feel the rays of light, and I shine that. And if it's too bright, baby, you just take some cover, but I'll always be here. So I love y'all. Thank you so much for this space. I'm very excited to get into it. Thank you.
And let's spread that warmth over to Enoje. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks. I'm Enoje, and I guess a little bit about myself. I feel similar to Kulkiran that I'm a multifaceted person. I have many different things going on all the time, but I love the age that I'm at now, because I feel I finally come to a place where I can accept all of the things about myself that used to be in conflict with each other, but now I'm like, okay, I'll take it all. I'm a daughter. I'm a mother who has passed on, but gave me a tremendous sense of self while she was here on earth. I'm a sister, which is probably my most important role that I occupy on the day-to-day basis. I'm a younger sister, so yeah, calm down, Kija. I'm a younger sister, so that I find that it affects everything that we experience. It affects everything about our personalities. I was saying to Hamida and to Yodit, that you're definitely going to have to tell me when to talk, because I never talk until somebody says it's your turn to talk, because I'm a good younger sister. I'm well behaved. I'm a very well behaved person, so I'm both a middle-aged woman and an underdeveloped teenager at the same time. Somehow I'm a sister, I'm a younger sister and a daughter, and everybody's always telling me what to do, but then I have 4 children at the same time. So, it all kind of, mixes itself up. I'm a serious nerd. I take my nerd life very seriously. We were talking about being knee deep in spreadsheets, and I'm like, that's the joy of my very existence, is to be knee deep in spreadsheets. But then I also love arts and artistry. I perform comedy. I don't even know how that happened. I tend to jump into things without thinking, but at the same time, I'm a bit of a worrier and a planner. And, so all of these things just don't go together, but somehow they all come together, in my work of social justice, which is a, relatively new term for me because, coming up in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have words for this kind of work. We just did it. We were just out there doing stuff, so in the 80s and 90s, we'd be out there, planning marches and doing all kinds of things, away at university and in the Black Students Union, and everything was all about, Hotep and blessing sister and yes to you, brother. But at the same time, I want to go to the club. And if I hear back that thing up, if I hear it now, it's going to be embarrassing for everybody, So we have all these parts of ourselves that just all somehow come together and make up the person who we are today, and we just have to embrace them. We just have to embrace it. I love my life. I can say that fiercely, that my life is full of people and situations and exhausting. The pandemic for me was really a time of tremendous growth and change because everybody was home at the same time. I don't think I even realized how many kids I had until everybody was home at the same time. My grocery bill has exploded. I have 3 sons and a daughter. Everybody is a teenager or older. My sons smell. I hope they can't hear me saying that, but yeah, I have not been around this many people in a long time. We had 8 people living here in the house together. So a lot of people were saying, oh, I'm very lonely. I'm like, I can say I am many things, but I can definitely say that I am not lonely. In fact, I'll be lucky if I even get the 90 minutes that I need to be able to do this before somebody comes knocking at my door asking for something. But I've learned to embrace that. I've learned to say, okay, this is my life, and whatever it is, I'm just going to take it as it comes. I'm going to take these tripled grocery bills and gas bills and everything and just learn to see it as a blessing and to be really, really, really intentional about that. So I'm excited to be here today just to have an opportunity to talk about how we can find joy and, more importantly, create joy in our lives as we do the work of trying to make life better for everybody else. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for bringing yourself in this space. Last but not least, Violeta, do you want to introduce yourself and the communities and identities you're drawing upon?
Absolutely, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Violeta Donawa, and I'm present, and I'm present to a lot of things. And so I want to acknowledge all the things that we all had to say no to, or yes, but maybe later to be in the room. And I want to acknowledge the deep yes that we all decided to prioritize to be in the room. So for myself and in my environment, I work in an integrative behavioral health setting with medical behavioral health services, cultural services, youth programs, things like that. And so if anybody knows what that environment is like, or even if you just have children in the house with you or a pet in the house, like, right, there might be things pulling on us at the same time while we're saying yes to being in this space. And so I'm a clinical social worker, a holistic mental health therapist, and a Reiki 3 practitioner. And so hopefully soon to be acupuncturist, but we'll see how that goes by the end of the summer. The social identities I come from, like this could be really long. So I think I'm going to try to introduce myself in terms of length, width, and depth. And so what I mean by that is I come from the land, as we all do in various ways. And so beneath my feet, I'm very present to the ground. I'm very present to the soil. I'm very present to the earth and the importance of taking care of the earth. I'm imagining for me, the roots of a strong oak tree kind of coming down beneath my feet, beneath the soles of my feet, down. It's a cold floor. It's going to be 100 degrees today. So I'm so glad I got a cold floor. My shoes are off at work. So I can feel the roots, right? Reaching really, really, really deep down. And I can also envision myself being connected to the sky, as we all are. And that there's energy reaching from the crown of my head all the way to the top of my ceiling, through the roof of this agency and this wonderful environment that I work inside of. I'm grateful to work inside of. Going all the way beyond the roof, all the way to the sky. I'm present to my width and all of our width. So I can feel my arms, I can feel the temperature, it's kind of cool on my arms. I can feel the space that my body takes up, like this. I know that if I, this way, I can feel my wall. This way, there's nothing to the right of me, there's nothing but air and space. But I know I can extend my energy all the way to the wall where I have an affirmation note that says, I'm good people, soy buena gente. And I can reach through that affirmation and I can reach the yard where we have things planted. I can reach the outside. And I can also sense all of you in the room with me. I can feel that, even virtually through a screen. I can feel that. And in my width, my front to back, I can feel like the juiciness of like the meat on my bones and the muscles beneath my skin, my bra strap. I can feel the juiciness of my tummy, back to front, right? We have the front of our tummy, we have the back of our tummy, we have the front of our heart, and we have the back of our heart. And so in me being able to feel my depth front to back, I can feel my futuring. I can feel that we are here to future together. I can feel my commitments and what I'm committed to. As a mental health therapist, I mean, we're also talking about our behaviors. We're talking about historical trauma. We're talking about intergenerational wisdom, intergenerational pleasure, intergenerational pain, and the list goes on, right? Because we've inherited so much in our bloodlines and in the society we've inherited. So I can feel the future, right? But again, I don't want to feel it too much, lean over, hit my head, right? So it's balanced, right? So I also have to feel the back. I have to feel my bloodlines, the people I come from. The African Americans that I come from West Virginia and Appalachia, the Native folks in my bloodlines who I have no idea. I have no idea their names, but I know that they existed. The African American bloodline, Rome, Georgia. The great grandparent I have who was very closely experienced experience of enslavement, and what that meant for her in terms of sexual assault and being a survivor. The stories that we don't tell in my family line about what's going on. I can feel the lineage and the bloodline of the Panamanians that come from Central America, the Caribbean side. The people that came over from Jamaica, Trinidad, the West Indies to Panama to build the Panama Canal, which is this cross section that unites the Atlantic and the Pacific. So I see myself also as a cultural worker. Like I stand at that intersection as well. And I try to let these things ground me, right? My length, above head, below soles of feet, below tailbone, with being in this room with you today, being in my body, and depth. So thank you so much, Tanu, for having me here. And I'm looking forward to the rest of this conversation. It might seem like I don't have a lot of pleasure and humor right now, but listen, I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm real heady sometimes, and real spiritual and philosophical. But the last piece I'll say to this before we jump into conversation, right, is the reality is the revolution does and can hurt. And here's the thing about it though, we all are holding the both and. So how do we find respite when it hurts, right? How do we find respite from our grief? Like how do we find respite when we've lost friends, family members through the COVID or other things, right? These past couple of years. And how do we give ourselves permission to be in pleasure, even while things are changing and things are hurting? That's why I'm here today, like for our respite, and to share some pleasure and talk about the importance of pleasure in bringing us home to our bodies and ourselves.
Violeta, oh my goodness. Yes, yes, yes. And Kulkiran, your connections and identities, and enoje and Nicole. So I'm going to make this brief so we can get back to our beloved speakers. What we're gathered here today, this is going to be the blurb that brought us together. Laugh as much as possible. Always laugh. It's the sweetest thing one can do for oneself and one's fellow human beings. Maya Angelou uttered that. And so, very similar to what Violeta just shared, social change work has this heaviness to it. But in spite of that, how do we center pleasure, laughter, and joy in our lives? And let's, without further ado, explore how humor and pleasure can be tools to engage in activism. So I'm going to just drop one question and then back away from the speakers and let them do their thing. How do you find joy in the revolution? And why don't we start with Nicole, then Violeta, then enoje, then Kulkiran.
I mean, this is for me free therapy today, okay? I've had meditation, I have grounding, and a comedy show. It's just like everything, all of the things, right? So I like to always, sometimes in a room, of course, bring my all, but also say, I'm almost 40, and that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. And I like being a person who can willingly say that and rightfully say that, because in our work, ageism is real, right? As I say that I'm almost 40, this is the first time I've really been present in my body. In a very, very long time. And as I have conversations, I'm here with my dear friend and sister. Her name is Cassie. And she said, you know what, y'all, I'm tired of the word healing. She said, how can I continue to heal and the wounds keep getting reopened? I need another word. We're still searching for that. But again, she also said that within the process, there is joy, there is pain, there is all of these things. I would say that when I sit in my body, I want to feel all of it, the pain, the frustration, the angst, all of it. But I remember a really, really pertinent conversation that I had around language. And I have a friend that I did a lot of work with. Her name is Sadie Sarr. And at the time I was working at an organization, all white leadership. And we brought Sadie in. She runs a beautiful organization called Abisa. And my executive director at the time said, so I have a question for you. How do I empower your communities? So her and I looked at each other and I said nothing. She said, who are you to think that you can give me power? Who are you to think that I don't already have it? And for myself, who would like to be more cultured, more traveled, that instance really grounded me in having a conversation about language. And when I sit back, I think about being able to navigate spaces with friends and individuals from my community who I don't have to explain those things to. Yesterday, my friend Cassie came to my daughter's recital. She had a concert. She was singing Wade in the Water, and they was hitting them baritones, y'all. It was amazing. And then we can come up to Lansing and do the work. And my day-to-day job, I'm a development director at an organization called Michigan Voices. And I finally feel home after over 15 years in this work. And the freedom and the revolution for me is to not have to always explain why I need to be in this space, right? Not having to dim my light or my shine because I don't want to be targeted. I need insurance. I need to pay my bills. At the time, childcare was a lot, right? Still is. And so joy for me is being present in this space and being able to move freely and be me. And it's a lot of pressure. I'm knee deep in some spreadsheets as well. But the fact that Sunday I was able to go to a community event and we work with over 65 different organizations that are BIPOC here in Michigan, this is what I feel makes the work worthwhile, is that you can see change, right? And My daughter is 8. And to have conversations I thought I'd never have about George Ford and Breonna Taylor, and I'm bringing them into this space. But I was able to take her with me to that art in the park, paint, draw. But again, being present within my body, I've been doing self-discovery myself with my daughter. Not only is it beautiful, but it's breaking intergenerational trauma. It's helping me be accountable. I say sorry to my daughter, and I say sorry to the individuals that I may have hurt doing advocacy, co-workers, whoever it may be. I feel in these spaces with intention, we have to talk about it all, and we have to really have those crucial conversations. But it's hard to do that if you can't show up. And in my life, intimacy, now with me being present, is such a beautiful, beautiful space. I have my days, but my partner knows me and knows my body. And as someone who has went through dissociation and fog and numb, to have someone see me and I see them, good, bad, and ugly. When you get up in the morning, your breath just stinking, y'all looking at each other. You know, we've been talking about queefs and farts, and not to get too deep and dark into the weeds of things, but, you know, to even be able to be like, I need a moment. I gotta process this. I don't know. Because as a Black woman, I really centered myself in the conversation of strong Black woman. And I was burning myself out doing this work. And because we have to change this narrative, and unfortunately these 2 years, myself as an artist, I've used those quiet spaces to create and navigate what's new, but that's what I did as a young child growing up. And so just that connection of showing up as myself and being present, I'm able to say that I am not hurting every day anymore. I have my moments, but again, it's the process of taking those sweet, sweet spots in it. I make sure that every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm just doing a little check to see how I am, make sure I'm grounded. And if not, finding that support. So I'm very, very happy to have this conversation because I'm still working through workplace trauma. I have 2 Black executive directors, and I can show up however I look. Like I said, I change. I don't know. I might wake up and decide to just take all this off. And guess what? I could put a baseball cap on, go run a meeting, get funding, fundraising, and be myself. And that is the whole point of it all. And so as I wrap up in that, I will say that, you know, being present allowed me to, you know, Violeta, just knowing the work that she does, the Reiki, and just feeling her energy. Like, I know that that could be something that I can obtain, I can do. And y'all, I have an amethyst crystal here right with me for y'all, you know, so it, you know, I'm in the baby stages of it, but just again, being present and being current, you can imagine like all of us fighting these isms and smiling and laughing at times and being and giving ourselves permission. I feel like that is no quick answer, but it's a process, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
I believe my name was mentioned next after Nicole, and I'm present to this question that Pastor Velma Jean Overman also placed in the chat box. So it's kind of 2 things. One, like, what's my personal story and finding joy in the revolution, and also how is power defined today, and who really controls our version of power? I think that's such a profound question, because I think the revolution, whatever sector you're in, whether it's in the household, gender roles, and like how we socialize our children, how we give them space for like gender expansion and abundance, whether we're talking about in the workplace, talking about circular ways of doing things and trying to interrogate hierarchical ways of doing things, or we're talking about revolution, we're talking about free Palestine, or we're talking about like actually like shifting governments and making sure that people are safe in that process. Like, there's so many different ways. Like, actually, like, one of the leading questions I think that I have in my spirit is like, okay, like, how are we defining revolution? What does that mean? And regardless of the ways that we're defining a revolution, whether it's at the micro level, the individual level, the organizational level, the global level, et cetera, we're always talking about shifting power, sharing power. And when we can get power in a much more equitable place, at least in my experience, that's when I have a little bit more levity in my life. That's when I'm not walking on eggshells and I have a little bit more space to laugh and joke. That's when I want to be at the water cooler with somebody talking about your day and what plants you're growing in your garden, or the chickens that I have, or like, you know what I mean? Like, when I feel like I won't be penalized, because when we're talking about power changing, we're also talking about somebody gets penalized. Some boys I might be preaching to the choir, but like, we're talking about people who get punished or penalized for going against power. Who really has time to feel like they are safe enough to laugh under such conditions? And so to find pleasure under such conditions. And so, because Nicole kind of brought up this piece around body and intimacy, right? Like this question around what is power, like I got a whole little notebook that I support people with and support myself with. And so when we talk about that, and the reason that I'm linking this to what is the equation of how we figure out how to find pleasure in ourselves day to day, we have to know what powers are actually working against our ability to access our pleasure. And so in some ways, I'm gonna just share a few ways that can happen. So when we're talking about power, many times we're talking about power and control. So when people use secrecy to exert power over us so that our voices are withheld and our contributions are withheld, we're talking about that. When people use threats and intimidation, when people don't let us practice our cultural ways of doing things, that might sound small, right? But, and I promise I'm gonna bring this from Hetty to here in a minute, but, right, what are the barriers? What are the things in our way? And so for me, I'm serious when I'm talking about, I want to know about your plants. Like I'm not just working with a cog in a wheel at my job. Like I'm actually like, what brings your heart joy? And I want to sit and share my story of what brings me joy. And honestly, the thing that brings me joy the most is like simplicity. But I can't access joy and simplicity when somebody's exercising power over me, right? And so, and how do I slow this down? Because I feel like there is the things that I have had to get free from to access my joy has literally meant changing place and environment. It has meant changing workplaces. It has meant changing cities. And I remember at one time I guess I still do live in Ypsilanti. I live a lot of different places, but I still live in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I remember Spirit said, if you want to do your work, you got to go in exile a little bit. You got to kind of be away from things that you might feel a little fearful to be away from for a little bit. And as a Black Detroiter, you can't tell a Black Detroiter to leave Detroit, right? You can you can, but like it runs deep. The pride that Black Detroiters have when your folks have been here, and like you have memories and you have seen different levels of gentrification happen. Is houses that I grew up in that aren't even here anymore, aren't even there anymore, right? And so stay with me. I do this in therapy too with my clients. Stay with me. I'm quiet, but it's because I'm downloading. There were boundaries around the city of Detroit before French people came in and said Detroit is Detroit. So we're talking about bringing in indigenous native contributions, right? There was land that encircled this environment far before the 1800s. And there's something that the land wants to share, that the land wants to share with my spirit in order to bring me more peace and more healing. Even though I'm a therapist, I love talk therapy, and that's great. But we also, for myself, it was like, you got to get back to nature. Ypsilanti was a little bit more green. So Spirit said, give back to nature, make friends with the trees, make friends with the plant people around you. And then when your heart is in a much stronger and rooted place, then you can come back. Then we integrate, right? So enoje was talking about, it's all these different pieces about me in ways that I'm like, clearly I'm a mother of 4, but I also have a sister I have this specific dynamic with. And all of us in this room, I guarantee you, we all have parts of us that for whatever reason, seem like they sit on 2 different ends of the spectrum. And yet here we are with whatever our story is. And so for me, I think I found more joy when I found more integration, when all the parts of me could fit in the room more clearly. But in order to figure out how to do that, I had to be listening between the lines. I had to be listening to spirit, and I had to be listening to spirit between the lines. So for me, spirituality is a really strong value. And to learn how to listen to what is unsaid, to learn how to let life be a teacher, in my experience, not somebody being older than me and so thinking that they have the keys, not somebody having a higher rank in a job place thinking that they have the keys. You might have the keys for you ain't got the keys for me. And so I think there's something about the importance of spiritual rootedness, integrating all the disparate parts. And when people try to tell us about ourselves, nope, that ain't it, Jack, sorry. I know myself more than me. I know myself more than you. And so, I don't know. I think more about how I'm sitting with this is like, what's the entry point? What's the entry point to how we access our pleasure? And that might vary across, but we got to figure out the barriers that are in the way to really lean in and go more deeply in that. Even when there's people on the outside who we value, best friends, parents, co-workers with clout, like whatever it is that we might value about people externally, we got to be able to see ourselves, and this is my experience, as bigger than whatever those perceptions are, and show up in the room fully and wholly and complete anyway. So that's kind of my answer to the first question. And that first question, and also Pastor Velma's question here, I just kind of put those together.
All right, so we were talking about, jeepers, what was that question anyways? Yes, how do we find joy in the revolution? And I'm a person, I really like to simplify things because there are always so many things like, well, what is revolution? That's what Violeta said. Like, how do we define revolution? How do we define joy? And more importantly, how do we define find? Find is a word I have a real problem with all the time because find is kind of like, oh, I was walking around and I just saw something on the street, and we take that to mean that I found it, or sometimes I find colonizers say, I found this, like they're out there exploring and they just find stuff, and we don't call that finding stuff. Because I'm like, that's not, if you took something out of my house, you didn't find it. You don't just get to just find my stuff and go put it in a museum and say that you found it, so I don't like that kind of find, but I like a find that is intentional, especially when it comes to joy. For me, finding something doesn't mean that you just happened across it. It means that you were literally looking for it because you wanted it and you find it. Like how my kids can never find anything when I tell them to go and get it. They say they can't find it, but really when I get up, I find it because I'm actually looking for it. Mothers, we can find anything. I'm like, find my purse, it's on my bed. They come back and they say, I can't find it. If I go to my room, I will find it on my bed. So when I say I'm finding joy, that means that I'm being very intentional about looking for the thing that I want. I'm going to skip over joy though. I'm going to go to revolution. Revolution to me is, on its most simplistic terms, it just means change. And usually it means change for the better. How do I find joy while I'm working to make change for the better? And joy can be whatever it is that you want it to be. But for me, joy means laughter. I love laughter because I think it's our first form of joy. It's the first joy that we know. That's the first thing we say about babies when we have them, the first time that they smile or do anything, we're like, we see their joy. We define it as joy. I don't even know if they know what it is, but we see it and it gives us that. We like to see babies smile. And as babies, the first time we hear joy, we usually hear it from our mothers. No, it's not gas. It is joy. We hear our mothers laughing, and as soon as our mothers are laughing, we want to know. Like, I can't even have a private laugh around here. My kids are like, what's going on? They want to be in my business because it's something that draws us in. So joy for me means laughter. And as a comedian, I feel that we're doing, comedy's in a weird place right now because everybody's like, comedians, what are they doing? Are they ruining the world? Are they offending everybody? Are they punching down? Are they this and that? Comedians are doing a lot of stuff that they're not supposed to be doing. What we're supposed to be doing is helping people to flex that muscle that for a lot of us become atrophied in our day-to-day lives. And that's the muscle of laughter. And it should just happen, but it doesn't just happen because we're not intentional about finding it. You know, when I was in my 20s, I would say to a friend, oh, come on over to, hey, you guys come and hang out at my house tonight. They say, what are we doing? We say, oh, we're just going to catch some jokes. It's an actual activity that we used to plan stuff around. Like, we didn't have any other purpose of getting together than just to catch jokes. So the muscle, like all of our other muscles in our 20s back then, was very soft and supple, and they flexed and they moved however we wanted it to move. Now the muscle of laughter, when we get older, we're not using it as much. It feels like our knees when we're in our 50s and 60s. That's also a muscle that we have to practice using. A lot of people don't want to go to comedy shows anymore because they're like, we have more important things to do, but nothing is more important than finding joy. And I'm not just saying that because I want you to buy a ticket and come out to any of my shows, but I'm saying on a day-to-day basis, we have got to be catching jokes. It's a matter of life and death, right? But what we do, how I use it for myself is, instead of making jokes at the expense of others, I make jokes on the expense of myself, right? So it's like not just a self-deprecating humor. I'm not pulling myself down. What I'm doing is using my own experiences to share, to create joy for others, using the things that cause me pain and freeing myself from them by letting other people laugh at them. This is where I'm going to tell you to wake up and work with me. So if you're like lying down, I'm going to ask you to join me in the chat, you know, because we're going to share some things. I want you to bond with me and tell me if you've experienced these things. So one thing that I often riff on when I have a show is I talk about what puberty was like for me. I don't know, were there any other late bloomers in the house? If you were a late bloomer, join me in the chat. You know, like if your body didn't do what you wanted it to do, it didn't live up to the promises that it was going to, just give me like a yes or a something in the chat so that I don't feel so alone, right? Because puberty for me was hard. I had an older sister who was also a late bloomer, but her bloomer blossomed a lot more than mine did, right? Like she was gorgeous, still is, some might say, but I'm not going to give her a big head because there's only so much space in these little Zoom boxes. So, right, I'm just saying she was gorgeous. And so her blossoming just made my blossoming seem like it was so much less than it was. I started wearing a bra when I was about 17. Okay, you know my life was hard. Have you ever had to wear an undershirt to gym class at the age of 17? It's painful. Trust me, it's painful. But at the time, I thought, this is something that I will never get over. Nobody will ever want me. I will never be able to wear a prom dress because I can't hold up the strapless because, you know, I have nothing. This is always going to be a burden for me. But now it can be something that I laugh at. You know, this amazing body that I thought was going to come, where all my friends said, oh, don't worry, it'll change when you start having sex, when you have a few kids, you're gonna have hips and you're gonna have this hourglass figure. 4 kids, I gave up. Yeah, so, well, you know, I did get the top because, you know, I had to feed them, but everything else, yeah, didn't happen. You know, so puberty, it was painful, but now it can be used to bring joy to other. You know, I talk about my kids. When I do my comedy, I talk about my kids a lot. Kids are a nonstop fodder. Like, they cost a lot, but, you know, you can earn it back if you can use them for material for whatever it is that you have to do. My kids wish that I wouldn't crack on them when I was out there doing my comedy, but I do, because I'm like, you eat all my food, you mess up my house. What else could you be good for if not this? At least I can have this, right? Anybody else have kids out there? Or if either you have kids or you know kids, you know, people say to me like, I can't believe that you have 4 kids. You don't look like you have 4 kids. I'm like, because you didn't see me before I had them. I was amazing. I can always tell when somebody doesn't have any kids, because I'm like, you couldn't possibly have kids. You look like you're getting a lot of sleep. You look like your life is really, really, really good, you know? And my kids are at a weird age now, I should say that. Well, like I said, they're the joy. They're the joy of my life because I laugh at them, even though they cause me so much pain. 6 beautiful kiddos. I love that. Yeah, my kids, they cause me a lot of pain, even as teenagers now, like little things like they go out at night and then they don't call to tell me when they're going to be home. Like, that's weird, because I'm like, you all have cell phones. I'm paying for the cell phones. So the very minimum you could do is call to let me know when you're going to be home. I don't think that's too much to ask, but for them, it's too much to ask. And, I can't really fault them because, I was a teenager in the 80s. And, that meant when you left the house, you were free. Nobody could find you because it was just a house phone. If you didn't have a cell phone, nobody had a cell phone in the 80s. I think the brick was invented in the 90s. Does anybody remember the brick? If you remember the brick, if you're old enough to remember the brick, the cell phone, oh, Nicole Denson is too young for this. The brick that doubled as a blunt object that you could like smash an attacker in the head with it if you could afford to have one. I couldn't afford to have one. Yeah, so in the 80s, we had pay phones. And if you didn't have a quarter, your parents couldn't find you. Good times, so I have a little empathy for my kids because it can't be easy to be found all the time. It can't be easy to find all the time. So yeah, I get joy from my kids. I get joy from my family. I spend a lot of time on stage talking about, what growing up was like. I make jokes on my sister. I make jokes on my mother. I occasionally make jokes on my husband, but I got to be a little careful with that, because I still have to live here and I have to sleep beside him. I don't want him to smother me with a pillow after a night of cracking jokes at his expense. So, we use what we have, but the important thing is that it's intentional, right? It's intentional. We got to try to make other people laugh. And by making other people laugh, we actually, heal ourselves in some way. Comedy has been a really great form of therapy for me. I started doing it professionally after my mom died. And, I guess a lot of comedians might say that too, that we literally had to wait for our parents to pass away before we could do something as frivolous as this. Because, your parents are like, really? This is what you want to do with your life? I spent all this money putting you through school and now you want to stand on stage and tell jokes? Okay. But after my mother passed away, my first, outside of her funeral, where I would say I first performed, my first presentation of comedy after that was literally ranting to an unsuspecting audience about how hard it was to plan her funeral. It was awful. I don't know. Has anybody else ever planned a funeral? Yeah, I see Yodit. I see a couple of hands here. Yeah. Funerals, I'm just going to tell you now that they're ridiculous. Like just even the fact that they have names for the caskets. I don't know if they have that in Detroit, but they do have it here in Toronto where you go there and they're like, do you want cedar comfort with a nice, lining so that your mother will be comfortable? And maybe you'd like mahogany joy. I'm like, this is garbage. I don't even understand this. What are you doing? What are you talking about? What does any of this mean? You could get a casket with gold cherubs at the corners. And all of this, of course, just to stick it in the ground and bury it, and nobody is ever going to see it again. Yes, crushed blue velvet. I mean, they have everything. So at the time that I was planning, this is the first funeral that I ever had to plan. I was at such a loss of what to do with all of these feelings of rage and loss and confusion that I just took it to the stage. Like, well, you asked me to come up here. I guess this is what I'm going to talk about. Can we talk about the man that said, we'll have a lovely place where you can bury her in this plot. And it has a lovely view between two beautiful trees that she can enjoy the sun coming up every morning. I was like, dude, she is dead. Did you miss the part where I told you the woman is dead? I don't think she's going to be watching the sun come up. But thanks for the extra, $30,000 that you want to charge me for this lovely view. I hate these people. See, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of joy there, but the audience laughed. I was like, I don't know why these people are laughing. They're kind of morbid. They're kind of crazy, but I realized that I enjoyed the power. So whether that's a power for the audience, whether it's cracking on your coworkers in the morning to make it, to make their lives a little bit better, whether it's, cracking at the Thanksgiving table with your family, it's something that we just always have to be doing. And once you're always doing it, it becomes natural. But I think a lot of us have forgotten. So I'm just going to encourage you to remember that finding joy is really looking for joy and finding joy. So you find joy like something that you really wanted to get. You got to look for it. You got to get it. And you've got to constantly be in the business of making sure that those muscles work.
I feel like you just gave us a show, so I don't feel like we can transition to Kulkiran until we give you your claps. Thank you. Kulkiran?
Yeah, thank you, three of you, so much for that. going last is hard, right? Because you're like, ooh, there's that, and there's this, and there's that from everybody that somebody, folks said. And so I'm going to do my best to try to, yes. Okay, here we go. So enoje, thank you so much for just saying right now about like, it's laughter, because just on Monday when I had my therapist appointment for myself, my therapist was like, joy actually is in the heart, and from Chinese medicine. And he encouraged me to do a laughing meditation where we did. I know you, I see you, I got you. So it's basically like how first it was like sort of like this stretching to kind of expand, to allow like the heart space to just be known and to connect with joy and play and pleasure and all of the yummy goodness that is nurtured there, and to lift our arms and to do this sort of like ha 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 type of thing. And it was silly and playful, but it was absolutely powerful. And so when I hear Enoje, when I hear you say, joyous through laughter, even if I can't totally find it out there, or there's not a spontaneous moment, I can create that. And that comes back to Nicole. We can create. We have the power to create joy. And I think that's part of what makes a revolution so radical, is that I don't have to necessarily find it out there. And I think inside of like, so, being trained as a clinical psychologist, it's very prescribed, AKA colonial and bullshit, super hard. And I had to basically unlearn after $100,000, debt, unlearn everything that I just learned, and to get a piece of paper with letters behind my name that legitimizes me. No, but all that to say that, in colonized therapy, it's to maintain the status quo. It's to have kind of a band-aid. It's to say, well, even though you're Black and brown or have other marginalized identities, like, you're still safe, so I don't know, like, it's really just all in your head. And it keeps us in our head, actually. And so to be able to say, like, how do we find joy in the revolution? Coming back to Nicole, embodiment. I too, almost 40 years old, am just now experiencing what embodiment feels like. And the fullness of that. Violeta, when you did your check-in and you did it through length, through width, and through depth, I wrote that down. That really, I could feel the dignity. I could feel the expansive community. I could feel the legacy, the story, oh my goodness, how powerful. And so I think part of my response is like, I'm so moved, I'm so touched, I'm so inspired by what I heard. And I think that's joy, in these types of moments, bearing witness to other people's experiences, their stories, and not trying to change it or fix it, not trying to, which is also a very, very stereotypical sort of like colonial therapy agenda, so it's an invitation where we don't need to find that sense of safety or that sense of joy outside of ourselves or some external reward. If I do this, then I'll be good and I'll belong. So, I also bring with me like massive burnout from being subjugated to the model minority myth as a Desi American, still marginalized, not even central experience as an Asian American. And I was, I had an allegiance to perfectionism, to codependency, to inauthenticity. I had no idea how to speak up, honestly, because that was never allowed. I didn't know what my feelings were. I had to unlearn and figure all that out. And through therapy and energy work and psychedelic experiences or other kinds of expanded states, community, like the vulnerability of intimacy, of what is it like to actually be in relationship where I can say something, this happened to me, this is really fucked up and it hurt me and I'm scared to be held in that. And even in as with the colonized therapy, it's like they use the word emotional regulation, another kind of tool to kind of control, to dominate the experience of being a human. Whereas now there's this revolution kind of happening where we can break this down. We can ask like, well, like, who says? Why? Who does that actually benefit? And what would it look like if I just slowed down, checked in with myself, just held space and offered a container for that holding, for that witnessing, for that being with, without trying to save or rescue, because we don't need that savior any either, but that how that comes from within, how that comes from spirit, how that comes from being inspired by other people, how they're choosing joy in this revolution. And I also really appreciate, so actually I wanted to share that I had a massage done by a healing justice practitioner who's like absolutely magical. And basically she's a Black queer woman, and she only really she touches other Black, brown bodies. And like, if she's going to touch a white body, they have to be like vouched for. I very much appreciate that. And I appreciate her newsletters too. She just, tells it like it is. Coco Healing Collective, shout out, there was a moment after the massage where she said that like there was sort of an image of a woman that had come to her, just like breathing, wailing, just crying, and so much pain, so much suffering, and connected to me somehow. And the message of that was like, do not meet that ancestor or that spirit or that being, don't meet them with sad eyes. Meet them with a smile on your face. Look how far you've come. And I'm still processing that. I don't know what. So I get to play, I get to have fun, I get to, that's weird. And this also brings us back to something we touched upon at the planning session that I want to bring in here, which is like the guilt that we feel for choosing ourselves radically, that's internalized capitalism doing its job, and that that there's work around that. And so when Vio was like, what are the barriers to being able to radically choose joy or pleasure, I learned like whatever is in the way is the way. And so if I'm unable to say yes to myself radically in this, through these small moments of joy and pleasure, what part of me that has internalized these as Shawnee Murray Brown from Kindred Wellness speaks, from Decolonizing Therapy for Black Folks. She goes, what with this injected system of oppression, how do I meet this part of me with grace, with compassion, that's saying, no, you can't play. No, you can't take a break. No, you can't say no. Because people are expecting a lot of you. And what would happen? Then people will just be disappointed, and then you'll be, disposed of, you'll be thrown away. And that is absolutely fucking terrifying. And to also be a multi-marginalized individual in this world where it isn't safe out there. And I'm getting a little bit lost in the sauce because there's so much here. And I think that, that trauma, the violence, the oppression that we live all the time, that's like pervasive, that is also just, it just creates such a constriction. We have to shrink. We have to pull it in to protect ourselves because we don't know. It's so uncertain. It's so wild out there. And how do we move through that? How do we expand that heart space to say, I'm allowed to play and to laugh and to not take that on, to not take on that supremacy or that domination or that trying to control me. Like, are you, that's why I love Maya Angelou. I love that was the quote for today. And it brings me back to Still I Rise. Everything that she said inside of that is such an inspiration. And so, okay, where am I going with this? So that I think too, I wanted to mention what Nicole had shared about like the word healing. I agree. Like as far as like, can we play with that word? Like, what does that even mean? And I really appreciate being able to have the opportunity to redefine that for myself, for how my clients, the people in my life get to do the same. And words that came up for me were like protection, permission, vitality, sustainability, integrity, liberation, embodiment, integration. Vio, you mentioned that. And I so appreciate that. So for me, how I find joy and pleasure and play in the revolution is also just note, like when I wake up in the morning and I see like my melanated skin, and I see my hair, my hairiness, and my fatness, and I just like, I can feel it, the juiciness. That's the word of the day, that feels like just me existing and not having to perform or show up or to be, like, that feels revolutionary. That feels so moving in a way that I'm like, okay, I want to love on myself. I want to show myself some TLC, and so what that looks like is how I try to connect to breath. Sometimes breath can be hard for me because the way that my trauma manifested was I had to completely kind of dissociate. I was disembodied, disconnected. So breath work was really hard for me, but centering on my heart instead of even using the word body, being a fat body, and being having a lot of trauma and violence about that, and also being desi and being exoticized and fetishized about that. Oh my God. Okay, not okay. I'm gonna pull it back. But just how I was able to kind of reclaim joy through loving on my body in this way, through meeting my feet on the earth. Like, okay, I can have feet. Feet can meet the earth. That's cool. Like a safe, approachable way to, like, from the ground up, from the land up, from the spirit down. And I think that too, that's what colonial therapy kind of reinforces, is like for everybody to kind of stay in their head and to revolutionize that, to come down into your body, like how VO was modeling for us. I so appreciate that, because I think that's like another moment, a huge moment actually, of decolonizing our own mind and our own body to give ourselves permission, like, I can speak from here. I can speak from here. And that was the biggest change that I knew that I was healing. Was I used to talk up here, like it was like up here, I don't know if it was up there or not, but it was like, it felt like it was up here. And I don't even feeling that now, I can feel a tightness. But when I drop down into my truth of who I am, that feels really powerful. And then basically like saying no to whatever drains my energy, whatever is going to steal my vitality. You get one word from me and that's a no. And also maybe a why, because I'm curious and I'm compassionate, and like, that might not be any of my business. I might not ever know, but like, may you be well, so loving kindness meditation really helps with that too. And anything that inspires and moves me, like sensuality, but also bringing it back to the little kid in me. Like, what did they love, and how could I center their happiness? And one thing that they love are bubbles. They love bubbles, and I brought that here today for all of you, because that was bubbles. That's right. And so, what is all this to say? Like, oh, and there's this other really beautiful moment I had at the park the other day where walking the dog, throwing the ball for her, and I found like a tiny, tiny piece of chalk, and I was like, I think that's divine. I think there's a message there. Like, I see the signal. So I picked up the tiny piece of chalk. It wasn't enough, but I just drew a little heart on the sidewalk, where like permission to vandalize the city in like an ethical, responsible way, a biodegradable way. But anyway, like moments like that, how wild is that? So there's a lot more that I could go, but I just, oh, and I think the last thing is about like the struggle. And this is, I don't want to say it all right now, but it's all right here. And so like Hamida, which I don't see, I can feel her absence, and but she's still present.
She's here, but she experienced an outage with her internet. So she sends her request, but I didn't want to interrupt you all. She's
no
okay.
worries. Good. She had brought up this idea of like, doing this work means that I have to struggle. So if I'm not struggling, then I'm not doing this work well. That has sat with me since talking on Monday. And yeah, I think actually the struggle, like, how do we embrace that? How do we empower ourselves? Or I'm not entirely sure, but like, how do we use that struggle to help to prepare us to kind of endure or sustain through that constriction, because we still live in danger, while also strengthening this ability to experience joy, to say yes to ourselves. And for me, this also comes back to community, because we're relational beings. We are hardwired that way. We're learning how to be more interdependent. We're attuned to each other's nervous systems. And so joy and how to revolutionize that is like how we're learning how to be a model and a mirror inside of our relationships, like permission to be messy, permission to not be perfect, permission to get it wrong, to make mistakes, to actually cause harm, because that's what happens in relationships, and conflict can be generative. But this concept of loving justice that Kai Ching Kam talks about is really powerful, and I think is worth looking at if you're wanting to understand more about how to do this revolutionary work with the principle of love as a divine right, birthright for all of us, and as like a source that we can pull from. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the airtime to be able to say all that. Thank you.
Welcome back, Hamida. This is typically a time where we ask our guests to offer their invitations to our speakers, to offer their invitations to their guests. And I feel like you did a lot of that. And I also really receive your invitation, Kulkiran, to move into our bodies. And Vio, you shared it as well. So before we maybe have an embodied practice together, I wanted to there's so much today, but thank you for laughter and for juiciness and nibblings and creation and having our intimate needs met. And thank you for embodiment and for divinity and for reminding us, as both Glennon Doyle in her book Untamed and Julia Diaz in her devotional, The Altar Within, for reminding us that the parts of our minds and our bodies and our experiences that try to deny us joy, and of course we know Keisha was the 5th guest here, all up in the chat box, giving us her magic, but she wrote in the chat that joy is our birthright. And Kulkiran, sometimes Hamida and I have grappled with like love in the movement and struggle, right? And navigating that tension between our birthright and our lived and real experiences of pain and trauma. And so what I love about today's conversation is that, as our grandmothers did and our great grandmothers did, that you allowed us to hold nuance, to hold both and, Violeta, right? And I really appreciated you holding that really early on for us in the conversation, because I think white supremacy would tell us it's either or, and that's how we get into toxic positivity. It's also how we can get into really dark places, right? And as I become more of a yelder, I could just laugh at all the things I said I wasn't gonna do that I do now. I ain't never gonna do that. And then you get to be damn near 50 and you like, look at me. Here I am, got that whole, I'm not even gonna say. So my greatest lessons in this decade have included embracing the gray, right? That being said, I do feel like we spent a lot of time in our heads today, and I would love, Kulkiran, if you would guide us, all of us, as we round down in an embodied practice. And for those of you who are able to be with us slightly past 1:30, we would appreciate it. If you need to go, don't put a lot in the chat box, okay? Just go ahead and step away so that folks can remain really focused in our practice here. But we're so grateful you came, and Carly's gonna send all of y'all and put in the chat box a little feedback evaluation you can give us. Thank you again, beloved family, siblings, for your time. Kulkiran?
Absolutely, thank you. So if this feels comfortable, safe, and accessible for folks, there's some movement with the hands and some touch on the self, and some reflection, some taking in. And what I want to invite is something called havening, and adding something called affirmations, so affirmations. So yeah, if you feel comfortable, you can have your camera on or off. You can also just watch, or you can imagine if the movement and touch is not accessible for you at this time. I want to invite you to first bring your hands up to your heart space where the joy is. And very casually, very softly, just kind of move your hands, rubbing them on the palm, just back and forth, very casually. And I'm going to move us into 3 different positions. And in each position, I'm going to ask a question. And I'll repeat the question before we move to the next position. So this is our first position. Just notice what this feels like for you. And of course, if it's uncomfortable, if you don't want to do it, then please honor your needs. As you're rubbing your hands together back and forth in front of your heart space, I ask you, what if it were possible to find and seek pleasure, humor, and joy as your birthright? What if it were possible to find and seek pleasure, humor, and joy as your birthright? Take that in if you can. And if you can't, that's okay too. It's in the ether. You don't have to believe it. It's out there and you can grab it at any time. And when you're ready, we'll shift to the second movement, which is crossing your arms where your hands are at the top of your shoulders and caressing your arms down to your elbows. And just really softly giving yourself some TLC in this motion. Can you feel your arms? Can you feel them close over your chest where your heart space is? What if it were possible to cohabitate and thrive in a safe, equitable world where all beings are treated with dignity and respect? What if it were possible to cohabitate and thrive in a safe, equitable world where all beings are treated with dignity and respect? Take that in. And when you're ready, follow me to the third and final position, which is just very lovingly gentle circles on your cheeks, gorgeous cheeks. Can you feel your face, the warmth inside? What if it were possible to practice loving justice as a compass towards collective wellness and liberation, and to do so imperfectly? What if it were possible to practice loving justice as a compass towards collective wellness and liberation, and to do so imperfectly? Let that in. And to round that out, if this feels safe and accessible, go ahead and give yourself a really big hug. And little kisses if you want to. Thank you all so much for joining me in that. Thank you.